Well, hello there again. I'm David Butterfield, still Provost of Ralston and Professor of Latin. And a couple of weeks ago, I shared with you 10 books which had had a formative effect on me in my life to date. And since it's Christmas, I would like to share with you today 12 books of Christmas. These cover a wide range, but they all have within them either an element of fun and play, or involve a level of curiosity and excitement to the reader, which I think will make them worth your time. You've found me, by chance, reading what all classicists should read. What is a classic? This was an annual lecture, in this case delivered by T.S. Eliot, as president of the Virtual Society in 1944, in wartime, when the stakes could not be higher to reflect on what works of literature matter to us and why. And in this short lecture, Eliot sets out his own terms as to what makes a work of literature transcend to the level of being a national classic, a national epic, or a poem for humanity at large. He emphasizes the importance of civilizational maturity, and he's writing at a time in his 50s when his own maturity as a poet is at its zenith. It's a short, but in many senses profound and moving lecture, and I recommend it to anyone who loves poetry, and especially to those who love Virgil and his Aeneid. Okay, onwards to some Latin now, but not ancient Latin. This is Latin from the cusp of the medieval period and the Renaissance. And I'm talking about Lorenzo Vallo's On the Donation of Constantine. That's Emperor Constantine. And this is a treatise written in Latin in 1440 by Valla, one of the great humanists, then in his 30s, which exposes as fraudulent, as a fake, one of the most important documents in the world. That document claimed to be the Constitutum Constantini, a Latin text in which the Emperor Constantine in the 4th century AD donated the western part of the empire, western part of Europe, to the papacy. 1,000 years later, it's very controversial where the power of the Pope should begin and end. And in a rhetorical and philological tour de force, Valla exposes this document as not being an ancient text, but in fact a calculated 8th century forgery. This is part of the beautiful Itati Renaissance Library. It's got the Latin and the English. It's not too fat. And boy, is it a fun read. Okay, staying with fun, but moving to Greek now, and to the satirist Lucian. Lucian is not an ancient Greek writer as such, but wrote in the period called the Second Sophistic, when, under the Roman Empire, certain Greek writers tried to re-infuse Greek literature with the spirit of the classical period. And Lucian was a wonderful satirist. The work that I recommend, available in the Lerb, and you should not sneer at Lerbs because many of them are excellent in both text and translation, is the Bion Praxis, the Sale of Lives. What it is a short but sweet satire in which Zeus and Hermes host an auction. And what's for sale are not people as such, but ideas. And all of the Hellenistic philosophical schools, actually going back to Socrates and the pre-Socratics, now I think of it, are put up for sale. And it's a triple satire. First, the beliefs of these different sects of Greek thought are ridiculed for some of their more absurd elements. But much more importantly, it mocks the trivialization, the token book summary of these complex schools of thought in the contemporary age. Stoicism, Epicureanism, skepticism, all have been watered down and made cheap and hollow. Third and finally, it mocks the idea that you could simply pick a philosophy as a lifestyle choice. You'd pay some money, and so long as you've owned the book, you can say that you're this or that philosopher. It's a really elegant and amusing encapsulation of the state of philosophy under the Roman Empire. And amusingly, Socrates sells at the highest price. Next down, at a sixth of that price, is Aristotle, and then it goes lower and lower. Epicurus sells for only 2 minae, and Democritus and Heraclitus don't sell because they're too obscure to find a buyer. It's a short amusing little text, and you will enjoy it if you like philosophy and satire more broadly. Next, let's move over to here to another Greek text, and another one that will make you laugh this Christmas. Aristophanes. I didn't mention him last time, but he is both the greatest Greek comic and the only comedic writer from the late 5th, early 4th century that actually survives to us to read. So in that sense, he hasn't got too much competition. But his Thesmophoria Zeusai is a fantastic and I think underrated comedy. Written in 411 BC, it sees Euripides, the tragic playwright we mentioned last time, trying to escape the criticism that is emerging against him. Women have decided that in the tragedies of Euripides, they are mistreated and misrepresented. Euripides is a misogynist. He doesn't understand what it's like to be a woman. So, the women gather at the women-only festival, the Thesmophoria, and there, Euripides seeks to send in a spy. A spy goes in, and inside this all-female world, it's revealed that they are actually running their own microstate, just like male democrats in Athens. Euripides tries this trick and that trick to try and restore his reputation, but the women are very clear that they will not stand for representation on the stage the way that Euripides has depicted them hitherto. It's lots of fun. This is in Summerstein's commentary. There are earlier versions you can read which are worth your time. But it's a really clever comedy from the same year, actually, of the Lysistrata, where the women go on sex strike to stop the war. Okay, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4. Over here now, we'll leave Latin and Greek behind for a little while. And I'll mention 2 short books. Stocking fillers, the sort of thing you can read in an afternoon very easily. Oxford Very Short Introductions, we all know them. Many of us love them. One of the fattest, and therefore one of the least short among them, is Beauty by Roger Scruton. This really transcends the typical format of the series by being a work of deep philosophy. It draws upon his opinions about aesthetics, but also about the human emotions, about our response to things we are drawn to and things which very much deter us by their ugliness. It's elegant, it covers a huge range of things, and as we all know, none of us can live a life well lived without beauty in it. What next? You might think it would be a classic such as the letters of Abelard and Eloise, or Morrissey's autobiography, but actually it's this, Josef Pieper, 20th century German philosopher. Here's an English text translated into English from the German, Leisure, the Basis of Culture, and our friend T.S. Eliot crops up again. It's a short text, but fundamentally it aims to set out how leisure needs to be the base state of our lives. The Romans had this right. The Romans describe work, business, as negotium, which means not otium, and otium is leisure. That is, they defined the cadence of their life as being about leisure, but things get in the way. But that only begs the question, what leisure are we talking about? And Pieper sets out, in a mid-20th century mindset, what it means to be at leisure and what work that requires of you. It's not a state of laziness, but actually of being free for speculation and deeper meditation. A lovely book and one I recommend to all of you. On to number 7 then, which I think is in here somewhere. Oh, here we are. Tom Holland's Dominion. Doorstopper in size, but well worth its weight. It accounts how the West came to be as it is, and fundamentally that is a question which touches not only upon the Greco-Roman inheritance within the Western world, but also the formative effect and world-changing course that Christianity takes. It's fundamentally showing how Christianity emerges as the thread that explains why we, wherever we are in the West now, think the way we do. It really is a revelatory book for those who haven't thought much on that important question, and it cannot be read without going away to think deeply about things you hadn't interrogated before. So that's a great book. I think we need to head next door at this point for the remaining 5. So come on through. Okay, here we have it. Slightly different character with this one. The Neophiliacs. Now, this seems as though it's some sort of anthropological or sociological study of the revolution in English life in the 50s and 60s. Actually, it's written by Christopher Booker. He was an English writer, but also the founder and first editor of Private Eye, so a satirist who had a very keen eye for English life in the 50s and 60s. But remarkably, in the year, I think it's 1970, thereabouts, he offers his own reflection on the turbulence of the years the 1950s and the 1960s, the years 1969. And in this book, he sets out with really astounding prescience how the turbulent times of the 50s and 60s, which in many ways seemed liberatory and revolutionary, will actually be in a cycle which churns its way through from dream to what he calls nightmare. You may not agree with his analysis, but I often return to the book to see how our own times, here in the 2020s, actually parallel this same churn of ideas, especially among the young in the West. So, the Neophiliacs, the lovers of the new. That's what he diagnoses as worthy of satire. Okay, into here for our final 4 books. We're back to Latin because this is where I keep most of my Latin books. And down here we have a work not by the most honest of love poets, Catullus, nor by the most moving, in my mind, of love poet, Propertius, but by the most playful, Ovid. Ovid spent his whole life writing elegiac poetry, and indeed, for some unknown error, he ended up being sent to the farthest edges of the Roman Empire on the Black Sea. But his most entertaining work, one I think most enjoyable at Christmas, is his Heroides. These are fantasy letters written in poetic form from a famous figure of myth or history to another. So Penelope writes to Odysseus. Briseis writes to Achilles. Deianira, whom we mentioned last time, writes to Hercules, and Dido to Aeneas. And what's so different is that all of these letters are written in the persona of the woman who so rarely in the texts as we have them, Dido's a big exception, is able to set out her case and her frustrations at what the confines of myth have made her do or be unable to do. This edition is particularly fun if you find it. Arthur Palmer as the editor, because it has not just Ovid's beautiful and playful Latin, but it also has the Greek translation by Maximus Planudes, which you can read as a sort of parallel in Latin and Greek. So the Heroides, a text that will make you laugh, but it also may make you cry. Okay, into another corner for something playful on the Greek side. Curious title, Homeric Games at an ancient St. Andrews. Yes, that's the Scottish town. But when we turn inside, what we find is a Greek epic called the Alexad in Greek and in English. As we read it, we find that it's written in the style and the language of Homer, but it's about some games that go on in Scotland. Those games emerge to be golf and cricket. This is an epic satire written in 1911 about Scottish sport. But more than that, and this is where it gets really fun, it treats this poem as a real ancient document and comments on it in exactly the way that the author thinks is causing damage to Homeric studies. It creates scholarly notes which try to pull the poem apart, try to say it's composed by loads of different people at different times, uses faux archaeological pieces of evidence to try and make its case, and really spoils the beauty of the poetry. So here, for instance, we have a golf club on which written boustrophodon, that is to say forwards and backwards, are Greek letters as though this is an ancient text. And what the author, Alexander Schuon, is doing is trying to expose the emptiness of contemporary philological and linguistic criticism of Homer. For him, Homer was one poet, everything comes down to one genius, and he hereby pokes fun at his colleagues for failing to see the beauty of ancient literature. I don't agree with him as such, but I enjoy this very greatly for the fun it has in several directions. Okay, that's 10, which leaves me just for the last 2, which I can touch upon very briefly. Everyone needs to own this book. I don't care what your reason is. For not owning it, it's not good enough. You need to own this book. Brewer's Dictionary of Phrase and Fable, first written in the late 19th century, but it's expanded and expanded since then. I've got an edition from not too long ago. And the reason it's so amazing is that you simply cannot predict what you will find within it. Alphabetically, it arranges all sorts of terms, which come from literature, from fable, from myth, from history, and its very fact of being alphabetical rather than thematic means you can move from Mammoth Cave to the Man in the Iron Mask, to the Man Without Sandals, to Mugwump, to Muggletonian, to the Noctes Ambrosiana. I mean, it's amazing. This would be one of my few Desert Island books because it's a gateway to millennia of culture. Amazing. Finally, another small, but I think little-known book. Geoffrey Madden's Notebooks, edited posthumously by John Sparrow and Gear. And what it is a collection of aphorisms. That is to say, short little quotations which have real point to them from all manner of writers, many English, but there's French, German, and some ancient texts there too. They're arranged by theme, but they are wonderful. I have a great deal of fun, if I'm otherwise bored, working through these collected phrases. Because Madden himself, he retired quite early on in his life, and he devoted the remaining decades to reading as widely as could be, and like a bee flitting in the meadow, collecting these short aperçus, which for him held a lot of weight despite only having a few words. So a little paperback, lovely stocking filler again, and Prime Minister Macmillan, the man who gave a foreword to this. So there we go. Those are my 12 books for Christmas. If you're interested in the kind of things I'm touching upon, and in particular in the Greek language, do not forget that we at Ralston College are waiting to hear from you if you would like to apply for our MA in the Humanities. ralston.ac/apply. We have the prospect of fully funded scholarships where you'll learn in Greece for 2 months and then come to beautiful Savannah in Georgia. If that's for you, please follow the links. But otherwise, thank you for spending time with me, and I look forward to hearing what your favourite books this Christmas will be when you use the leisure that all of us have to find time to read and to think. So, Merry Christmas.